بسم الله إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. The short lecture that I have now is entitled The Etiquettes of the Student of Knowledge. And what we mean by that is that every student of knowledge, he should realize, and every one of us sitting here inshallah is a student of knowledge, and he's starting to become, starting his way in his studies of Islamic knowledge inshallah. Everyone should realize that every student of knowledge, he must possess certain characteristics and certain qualities that, even though it is important that other Muslims also possess them, he is more deserving of them than other people are. He must possess certain etiquettes and certain manners that he is more deserving of. And if he wants his knowledge to be taken from him and the people to benefit from him, then he must be of a certain character and a certain nature that entails people to benefit from him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, that verily you, O Muhammad, are of a very high ethic. You have very good manners. You have perfected your manners. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is described as having such good manners. Why? Because as Allah Himself says in the Quran, وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَظًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. Were you a coarse, ill-natured, rude person, of a very strict heart, of a very harsh heart, the people would turn away from you. The people would have left you. So the point is that the student of knowledge and the alim must realize that if his akhlaq, if his etiquette and manners are not good, then the people are never going to take his knowledge from him. He is not going to benefit others with his knowledge. His harshness and his coarse manners are going to turn people away. If he is arrogant, and if he is stingy, and if he is miserly, and if he is rude and obnoxious and doesn't have the proper characteristics, if he was an average Muslim, people wouldn't like him. So how much more so when he has knowledge and yet he's acting like that? So people are not going to benefit from him. Likewise, his knowledge and himself, they're not going to be of any benefit to society. So a person must realize that when he starts this path of seeking knowledge, he must have these characteristics and these qualities that, even though, like I said, other Muslims should also have it, he is more deserving of it. He is more deserving of these things. And this is why many of the scholars of the Salaf, the past, they realized this. Muhammad ibn Sirin, and he is also one of the most famous of the Tabi'een, or the students of the Sahaba. You have to realize the Sahaba are who? They are the companions of the Prophet. I'm going to use some Arabic terms, and I'm going to use them on purpose because I want you to learn them. I want you to know these Arabic terms. The Sahaba, they are the companions. The generation that came after them, Tabi'een, or the Tabi'un, depending on which way you use it. And the ones that came after them, Taba Tabi'een. The ones that came after them, Atba' Taba Tabi'een. And the ones that came, anyway, so you get the point, okay? Is that when I say the word Tabi'i or Tabi'een, it means that they are of the generation that studied under the Sahaba. Okay, so Muhammad ibn Sirin, he was one of the most famous of the Tabi'een. He studied under Abu Hurairah, and everyone knows who Abu Hurairah is. And he studied under many of the famous Sahaba. He said, كانوا يتعلمون الهدى كما يتعلمون العلم. That كانوا, they used to, meaning the Tabi'een and the Sahaba before him. Because he's speaking in the past, he's not talking about, he says they used to, or we used to, learn manners and etiquettes just like we used to learn knowledge. So they would learn etiquette so that they could apply it and practice it. They would learn good manners. They would learn morals. They would learn how to treat each other and how to treat their fellow students of knowledge and their sheikhs and their students and others. They would learn this just like they would learn knowledge. Also, Hassan al-Basri. Who is Hassan al-Basri? We mentioned him already. What year did he die? 110. MashaAllah. Excellent. By the way, what year did Muhammad ibn Sirin die? Very easy. 110 also. Very easy. You can't get confused. These two people are perhaps one of the most famous of the Tabi'in. There are many, but some of them obviously they're more famous than others. And Muhammad ibn Sirin and Hassan al-Basri, they are of the famous ones, and they both died the same year, 110 Hijriya. Okay? Hassan al-Basri, he said that إن كان الرجل ليخرج في أدب طالب واحد السنتين والسنين, that it was possible, and he's talking about 110 Hijriya, meaning the first century of the Hijrah. Imagine this time. He said it was possible, or it was possible, or it was very common, that a person would go out of his house and leave his house for 2 or 3 years, or many years, just to learn one adab, one etiquette. Not knowledge, etiquette. How to deal with your Muslims, how to be humble, how not to be arrogant. To learn those manners which when you add it to yourself, it increases you and your beauty. And when you take it away from yourself, it makes you look very ugly and very harsh. So Al-Hasan al-Basri said that the people, and he's talking about his own time and the time before him, they would leave their houses and they would go out for 2 and 3 years just to search for one etiquette, not hadith. This was also true. They would leave their houses to search for one hadith too, but they would also leave their houses to search for the proper etiquette, the proper adab. And Makhlad ibn Hussein, one of the famous scholars of hadith, he said to Imam Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak was one of the most famous scholars of hadith of his time, and he was of the level of the teachers of Bukhari. He was of that level, the teachers of Imam Bukhari. He died in the year... Good guess, no, 198. Okay, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. He said, Makhlad ibn Hussein said to Abdullah ibn Mubarak that نحن إلى قليل من الأدب أحوج منا إلى كثير من الحديث. That verily we are more in need of a little bit, of a little bit of good manners. We are more in need of this than we are to a lot of knowledge. Makhlad ibn Hussein, he says, he's speaking to the scholar of hadith, and he's telling him that we, all of us, the students of knowledge and the scholars of hadith and the scholars of every side, he said we are more in need of a little bit of good manners, of good etiquette, than we are to a lot of knowledge. Because the way that you're going to come to a person's heart is through your manners. It's not initially through your knowledge, it's through your manners. When you meet a brother with a smiling face, how is he going to feel? Versus if you meet him with a cold stare. You see, how is that person going to open his heart for you and feel love and respect for you unless you have good manners? And this is why, and we're not talking about the benefits of manners here, but that is a topic in and of itself, and there are so many ahadith pertaining to the benefits of having good manners and etiquette. Amongst them is the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said that should I not inform you of the inhabitants of paradise? They are the humble and good-mannered people. And should I not inform you of the inhabitants of hell? They are the ill-mannered, the coarse, the arrogant, the loud people. And amongst them the Prophet ﷺ said that the person who has good manners, the person who has good manners and good etiquettes, he reaches and he rises above the status of the person who prays all day and fasts all day and prays all night. He reaches and rises above that level, just by good manners. And amongst them, the Prophet said that the weightiest thing, the weightiest and the most heavy thing that a person will have on his scales on the Day of Judgment. You know that on the Day of Judgment there's going to be scales. Your good deeds are going to be put and your bad deeds. Okay? So the Prophet ﷺ, he said that thing that will be the heaviest, the thing that's going to be the heaviest on the Day of Judgment in those scales is good manners. Good manners are going to outweigh every single other thing. This is how important good manners are. We're not going to talk about good manners in general because that's a whole topic in and of itself. But what I wanted to emphasize in today's short lecture is the etiquette that a student of knowledge in particular should be aware of and be conscious of and try to emulate, try to put into practice. We're going to divide this lecture into 2 things. Firstly, the etiquette that a student should have with himself. The etiquette that a student should have with himself, dealing with himself. Secondly, the etiquette that a student should have with his sheikh or with his teacher. Okay? And obviously there are much more. There's also how you should deal with each other, how you should deal with your books, how you should deal with your... Even the scholars, but believe it or not, thousands of years ago, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they talked about how a student should treat his dormitory, the physical building, how he should live in it, you know, how he should be clean with it, how he should make sure that the restrooms are clean. I'm not making this up. Books of the scholars of hadith. Ibn Jama'ah, he has a book, he died 795, he has a book, تذكرة السامع والمتكلم في آداب العالم والمتعلم. He authored this book over, how much, 900 years? 800 years ago. Okay? And he has chapters in this book talking about the etiquettes of the student of knowledge when it comes to himself, when it comes to his peers, when it comes to his sheikh, when it comes to his housing, his dormitories, when it comes to even making sure that he leaves behind him a clean thing when he goes to the restroom. Everything is discussed. So there's not something we're inventing up in today's lecture, no. This is something which the scholars of the past, the scholars and the students of knowledge, they emphasize. And they realize that, ya akhi, how is a person going to feel when he goes to a restroom and he finds it dirty, a mosque? And suppose he's a new Muslim, or he's a non-Muslim coming to visit the mosque. What impression is he going to get, ya akhi? Everything counts. How much more so when you're a student of knowledge? Okay? All of you now are here. And it's well known that there's 30 or 40 students of knowledge living in the masjid. A person comes and he finds, for example, the restroom is dirty. How is he going to feel? These people are studying Islam and they do this, you know? You have to understand, as a student of knowledge, the world becomes conscious of you. Your every tiny move is going to be examined. How come he's doing this? How come he did that? How come he stared at me this way? Why didn't he say Islam to me that way? Okay? The people become much more conscious versus you're just a nobody. Okay? So you have to realize that the student of knowledge, right, he has to be more conscious of these akhlaq, of these adab. Because he wants the people to benefit from his knowledge. He doesn't want the people to reject his knowledge. He wants to get the sadaqah jariyah. So therefore, in order for